Welcome to CharityVillage Connects. I'm Mary Barrell. The nonprofit sector is facing a looming succession crisis in the coming decade, with a massive turnover in leadership as the boomers retire. Indeed, sector experts say this trend started during the pandemic as many established leaders stepped back from their roles and opted for early retirement. How can the sector be more intentional about succession planning in order to build sustainable organizations? What does it take to attract more young people to the sector and build better talent pipelines for management and boards of directors? Joining me to discuss these important issues is Dave Hutchinson, President and Leadership Talent Partner for Cause Leadership, an executive search firm. Since 1997, Dave has successfully placed senior-level candidates with a wide variety of organizations across a broad spectrum of the nonprofit sector. Dave's work focuses on building relationships with a long-term view for the advantage of clients and candidates alike. With over a decade of experience in board governance roles, he continues to serve as a volunteer board member and board chair in the sector. Welcome to the podcast, Dave.
Thanks, Mary. It's great to be with you today.
We're seeing the largest transition of nonprofit executives in decades. Can you introduce us to what is happening right now when it comes to what some are calling the inevitable leadership gap in our sector?
Sure. It's a challenge for many organizations, as you can well appreciate. And charity sector is a small portion of the greater marketplace today in Canada, but corporations are feeling this, private companies are feeling this, but in particular, I think charities are feeling it the most. We have less money and less talent to deal with the issue the way the corporate and private sector space might, and so it's a significant issue that we need to address. I think, in reality, you mentioned it starting during the pandemic as far as seeing some of the retirements that have been happening. But if we look back even further, I think we could probably go back about 20 years and say it's not just a retirement issue that we're facing today. It was a succession planning issue that we really maybe didn't ignore, but perhaps didn't fully embrace at the level that we really needed to. And so I've often said that, because of that, we didn't attract Gen X in the numbers that we needed for our leadership roles. And so today, anecdotally, they represent, say, 50% of the solution to leadership transition. And so our greater hope is really looking into that age group and kind of in their mid 30s to early 40s who really are, when we look at that demographic, are larger than the boomer generation was by sheer number, are now the largest living generation, and are going to represent a significant amount of the employment sector in the next few years. So there's a combination of things happening here, but I think when I consider the charitable sector particularly, it really started with succession planning 25 years ago. And our lack of readiness today is probably a testament to the fact that didn't really occur in the way we needed it to.
So why do you think that is? Why is it that the nonprofit sector has been rather lax at succession planning? Is it a question of resources? Is it, the founder's syndrome of not wanting to leave that passionate project that launched the organization? What is causing this?
Yeah, so those are factors for sure that you've just mentioned. I think in general, our sector is under-resourced in order to be able to prepare well for succession. We don't often have the liberty or luxury, I guess is a better word, to say that financially we can't always afford to have a number two or a number three in waiting while the CEO is still in their role. So that's part of it, is definitely a resource issue. I think it's a talent attraction issue as well. I mean, the two biggest issues facing charity today are talent and money. And if you don't have enough talent and you don't have enough money, then your sector is going to be challenged by those two, significant factors. And then, so it comes down to talent attraction as well. But what is attractive about our space that would cause people to come and work here? Obviously, mission is a huge piece of that, and so we don't usually falter on the mission side. We usually have lots of people that are interested in what our charities are about. But can they afford to come and work at a charity and take a reduced compensation package than they might be used to? Uh, are they from the other side? Have they actually got the education and the experience that we need to assume leadership roles? Have we done mentorship well? Have we done professional development well in our organizations? I would say, in general, probably not at the level that we need to. So those are some of the factors that are making it more challenging to find the talent that we need.
So I mentioned a term that I heard recently about the founder syndrome. I wonder from a recruitment perspective, what does that mean so our audience understands?
Sometimes that means run the other way, depending on depending on what's going on at the organization. But no, it's a challenge. You know, obviously, people with a strong heart for different needs and missions out there. Some of it really that was organically related to their own personal life, whether it was a loved one who was dealing with some sort of a health issue, whether it was an interest in education, whether it was an interest in serving, the global poor, you name it. There's all sorts of reasons why charities were started, and many of them had founders and still have founders that have stayed for many years. Founder syndrome is sort of the negative connotation related to that, though, when an executive leader or founder doesn't know when to leave, and hasn't prepared the organization for their departure. And a lot of it, it stems from their desire to keep doing good and their desire to continue to advance the mission that they're passionate about. But if we don't start recognizing that those transitions need to happen sooner than later, then organizations will falter, and it puts at risk not only the organization, but it puts at risk the team, and really, in some respects, it starts with the board, because while a founder may have started an organization, they don't own it. Nobody owns a charity. To a degree, I guess the board members are the moral owners. If you want to pick an ownership group, it is the board, but they're always changing as well. So it's a factor between boards and the founders to make decisions about when does it make sense to make an exit and prepare for an exit, and allow the organization to continue to thrive when they leave by finding the next level of leadership below them. So it's a dicey question for some folks, especially founders. And my heart goes out to many of them who have, spent 30 or 40 years of their life contributing to a cause that really meant something to them. But at some point, we all have to recognize that we've got to move on.
You talked about talent attraction being really part of the challenge. And I'm curious as to whether, we know that not-for-profits and charities do a rather good job of communicating their mission. They're quite experienced in doing that. They obviously have to in order to, ensure that donations continue to come in. I'm curious whether you have any points of view on what I've come to understand to be employer branding. So it's kind of a term that's used in the private sector where you're not just branding the products or services that the company might be selling, or you are actually branding the culture and the company itself as a great place to work. I wonder if you think that the not-for-profit sector has a lot to learn from the private sector in terms of understanding what employer branding is and what it is, and how important it is to talent attraction.
Yeah. So the challenge with employer branding is that you actually then have to live up to what you're saying publicly. And and that does become a culture issue very quickly. somebody coming in and interacting with as a new employee or interacting with a team during an interview process is quickly going to determine whether the employer branding actually does align with what's actually happening internal to the organization. So that's a caution for any organization, corporate or otherwise, and certainly it does truly affect the charitable sector. The so walking the talk and truly carrying it out from a leadership perspective is significant. Everything I forget who said it, but everything rises and falls on leadership. Maybe it was anyways, one of our leadership gurus said that. I can't remember who it was, but if leadership is not demonstrating what that brand promise is supposed to be, then nobody else in the organization is going to demonstrate it either. And so it is a leadership issue. And I would say in the charitable sector, it actually starts at the board level as well. Our board members actually living out that brand promise. And then the CEO and their executive team and everyone else who follows behind. So it's I think it's vital. I think it's important that we have a promise that we want to bring to the marketplace, and as a way of attracting talent, I think is very important. It's how we live up to it, I think that's the most important part.
Mm-hmm. I guess communicating what it's like to work with your organization is something that I don't think that not-for-profits are used to doing. They're used to talking about their mission, but not necessarily about what a great place it is to work.
Sure. Yeah. Well, and is it right? Or is it an organization that's challenged by culture issues or issues that are leaving a bad taste in people's mouth when they actually come in contact with that organization? So attraction is a major factor, and in respect to our sector, especially if we're trying to attract a younger generation, our organizations being leading with what is the future as opposed to the way we've always done it in the past. And not to say that legacy is wrong by any means, but we have to evolve as organizations. We have to evolve our leadership. And especially when we look at younger generations and attracting them into our sector, is the organization building healthy culture? Are they investing in education and professional development? Are they providing reasonable compensation so that somebody can actually live without having to, experience the resources of other organizations that are there to support them when they have a need? So it's a really important facet to talent attraction, but it's multi-layered. And I would say that the leader of the future for the charitable space is going to look very different than they did 20 or 25 years ago.
I'm curious whether you think that there are additional compounding factors that are also at play. For example, there's been a lot of talk in the sector about burnout, compensation and benefits that are lower than the private sector. I guess, and the challenges and the mental health issues that can often relate to being on the front line, doing that kind of difficult work in many cases. How do these and other issues contribute to the leadership gap?
Yeah, and I think a lot of this was exposed during the pandemic, right? We had organizations, just for example, our food banks, the immense increase, and even today it continues, the immense increase in the provision that was required for food banks to step up. Healthcare workers on the front line during the pandemic, that hasn't lessened up as far as the need and the talent required for organizations dealing in healthcare. As it relates to the future of leadership, as it relates to that, though, is how are we accommodating the realities that we face as a sector? Compensation will never be as high as it is in the corporate space. There's a few out there that, of course, make more than others, and yet they're running, very large, significant organizations, and you would expect the compensation level to be higher. But in general, our sector is not known for anybody getting rich by working in the charitable space. Let's put it that way. And so a lot of it is heart driven. A lot of it is driven by emotion, and thankfully and gratefully to some of the folks that work in charity, they have opened up and spoken openly about their challenges from a burnout perspective, and some of the reasons why over the last couple of years, especially. That's actually healthy, and hopefully we can continue that conversation as it relates to understanding what are the true challenges that charity workers face today in Canada. We talked about compensation a little bit already. We need to do better, but we're also in a situation where the latest Canada Helps Giving report, giving is up slightly, but it's still being given by less people. And so how do we attract new donors? How do we attract new investment from the corporate world? Where does that leave us as it relates to sustainability and social impact and social enterprise? Those are other areas that are attracting attention and attracting talent, frankly. And in some cases, like a B Corp, they're still a business, but they have a social foundation for why they exist. But they are a business. They can in some cases pay more than the charitable sector as well. So we are seeing a diversion, I suppose, of some talent away from our sector into others because of that. Anyhow, I think your question more was around burnout and leadership and what's the future look like. I do think we need to prioritize the health of our teams. We need to have a healthy culture. We need to look at things like remote work and hybrid work that allow people to have a life that isn't about commuting into an office every day. I know that's terrible for some of the pension funds who are trying to, continue to earn money off of their investments, and a lot of our pensions are affected by the real estate issues that are a reality today for many organizations. But I think in the charitable space, we've realized that technology has allowed us to operate well throughout the pandemic, and now even into today. Technology is only going to be better and better, at least as far as accessibility is concerned. AI is going to play a factor in the future of work as far as leadership is concerned. How we go about delivering, whether it's on our brand promise, as we talked about, or on anything to do with the mission of the organization. So technology considerations for sure, but it all comes down to culture and leadership, and those are the two key factors that are going to help people from a burnout perspective and an engagement perspective with our charitable organizations.
So what are some of the solutions that could be taken now to prepare for this shift that we know is inevitable, that you think are necessary in terms of rectifying this issue so that the sector has the best chance for strong leadership in the next decade or so?
Sure. And where we're at today, we have boards of directors who are transitioning at the same pace as our executive leadership, and they're transitioning at the same pace as some of our major donors as well. And so we can't look at what was, but we have to start looking at what can be. But today, to find volunteers, both board volunteers as well as other kinds of volunteers, is challenging. We've already talked about the challenge of finding the revenue and donations that we need in order for our organizations to thrive. But some of the things that I would look at, and some of what we're seeing in the marketplace today, is a change in how people are employed within the sector. So we are seeing interim executives. We are seeing fractional fundraisers. We are some organizations and some sizable organizations have already merged and shown that amalgamation with either some of their federated partners already, or other organizations that were completely distinct from them coming together. That helps solve some of the talent and some of the funding issues that we're facing. Frankly, I think we're still at a place where government is going to have to step up from a funding perspective, or loosen the regulations around how we see funding for our charitable organizations. Or maybe loosen the purse, I guess I should say, as opposed to regulations necessarily. But so there's a lot of factors that I think that have to come into play for us to see the solutions that we are looking for, and so flexibility in how we hire talent, who we hire, the terms that we hire them under. Those are going to be vital conversations for organizations coming up, especially in this transition period, because we don't have enough of the leaders we don't have enough talent in our market to replace the leaders that are leaving. So we're going to have to be creative and innovative about how we do employ people.
That's very interesting. So you mentioned fractional fundraisers, and you also talked about mergers. So when you say you have to be creative and flexible, especially in this interim period, if we hope to get a solution, what is a fractional fundraiser, for example? Like what are some of the strategies that you've seen?
Yeah, so shout out to Cindy Wagman and her organization, the Fractional Fundraiser Network. They and Lacey Kopinski, who's focused on maternity leaves, providing fundraisers on a maternity leave basis. So there are some folks who are addressing this issue. Now, it's a big issue, so it's going to take lots of us to address the issue. But fractional fundraising is where somebody is available to a charity, say 1 or 2 days a week, and at the same time they're serving another charity another day or two a week, and offering their fundraising expertise and experience that they've had over the years. Interim executives, interim CEOs, similar kind of idea, a little bit more permanent in nature as it relates to being there for 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, whatever the need might be, on a more on a more full-time basis. I shouldn't say the word permanent, but to help an organization through an executive leadership transition, to even just be available to a CEO who's not transitioning but needs the extra help for a period of time in order to grow their development team or build into the development team or the program team, whatever the need might be within the organization. So executives who have been CEOs or chief development officers or you name it, whatever the C-suite role they might have held, CFO, can actually be very valuable to organizations that could never afford them on a full-time basis, but can utilize them during a period of transition or a period of need within the organization's talent pool. So very helpful.
That's really interesting. Now, Charity Village, of course, we're in the business of posting jobs on behalf of nonprofits across Canada. We see what we call sector shifters. So that might be people who are taking early retirement, have some leadership experience in the for-profit sector, for example, but still want to be active and also, want to do something that gives them purpose, makes them feel like they have an impact, and utilizing their skills and experience. How much of that do you think will help the sector? Do you see this continuing as a trend?
People in the sector see that issue differently. Some are quite supportive of it. Some are very hesitant about bringing somebody in, especially a late career person who's not really spent much time in the charitable space. It would be my attempt to remain agnostic as far as that particular issue is concerned, because I do really believe that talent from other sectors should be welcome in the charitable space, and in fact would provide significant amount of talent that we do need. I would say that because of the transitions that we're facing, because of the talent pool that is the reality that we have today. If we don't embrace people from other sectors, whether it be the corporate or private sector or government, you name it, we're going to experience the deficit of their experience not being available to us. So for me personally, I would support, a properly nuanced entry point for people who come from the private or corporate space, and they bring, an immense amount of skills, relationship building skills, sales skills, which translates into fundraising, project management skills, which translates into programs, executive leadership skills that they have experienced elsewhere as well. So some people would disagree with me, but I'm favorable towards it. And I joke about this sometimes because people used to ask me, shout out to Paul Layloff, former CEO at Princess Margaret, but people would say, other than Paul Layloff's, who do you know that's made a successful transition into the charitable space? And the second question was always, or the second part of that was, because we don't know, right? Like there just wasn't enough examples. Now, I'm sure there's many examples around people who have successfully come in, but we often, unfortunately, only hear about the ones that didn't seem to work out for whatever reason. And but I think that's short-sighted. If our sector is not prepared to look at people from other sectors, then we are actually shooting ourselves in the foot from a talent perspective. I think the corporate sector, while it operates more from a revenue and sales perspective, we still see that in the charity space. We do need people who can promote our causes, who can promote the programs that we deliver, the services, if you will, that we have to deliver to society. And these are really big issues, right? We've got really smart, really intelligent people in the charitable space, which thankfully we do, and they're solving really big global issues, domestic issues that are way more than any corporate ROI would ever be able to accept as far as a return on investment. So ours is a social return on investment, but we still need the smarts and intelligence that comes from the corporate and private sector as well, I think, in order to achieve the things that we need. We certainly need to figure out how to work together. And we're seeing more and more of that. I mentioned earlier the social impact and sustainability world. That's a shoot that has grown out of both the charity space and the corporate space, and them finding ways to work together. So I think it's happening. I think we just need to embrace it and be more open about the willingness to recognize that we have a people issue. We need problems solved. The only ones who are going to do that are the people. And there's a lot of shared skill sets out there that we can take advantage of in our space. So I affirm it. I hope we do more of it. I do think it's part of the solution.
What are you seeing on the ground in your recruiting practice now? How is this issue impacting organizations and the communities that they're serving?
Yeah, so we've talked about burnout. We've talked about some of the financial constraints. Those are real. Those are happening. The effect that's happening on delivery of services. I was speaking with somebody from Daily Bread Food Bank the other day. They're now serving 330,000 people a month. They're having to buy millions of dollars more in food. It's affecting them, their impact, their ability to impact the cause that they're serving is constrained by the challenges that society is facing, frankly. So, the frontline charities that are out there, whether it be food banks or healthcare or social services, homelessness, poverty, mental health, the need is immense, and yet the resources are limited. And so that's what I would identify as why we need to really embrace a new focus on talent, a new way to not a new way, but a new focus on increasing compensation in our space, providing education and professional development to those that are in the space. Unfortunately, we've heard just recently of the shutdown of the Humber fundraising program at Humber College, that had been going for many, many years. And I think, I don't know all the details as to why that was shut down, but I can surmise that, people were coming in, going through that education, trying to get a job in the space, and were having difficulty doing so. So they've had to go back to the private sector or the corporate sector to find work. I read about, just on LinkedIn and other places where people talk about folks that are just leaving the sector, not for retirement. They're done, and they're going to find a place that will pay them more, that will utilize their skill set differently, that'll give them the weekends off, so that they don't have to work 70, 80 hours a week kind of thing. That's an overstatement, I'm sure, but the reality is work-life balance is hard to find, or that rhythm of life is harder to find for folks that are working in the charitable space, especially on the frontline issues.
I'm curious whether you think that organizations are doing enough to develop internal pipeline of potential leaders. I mean, certainly corporations often have, of course, they have much more resources, but they often have succession planning and their grooming of talent to take the mantle of leadership at some point. Do we see much of that in the nonprofit sector? And if not, what is stopping them, and what should they be doing today to get this started?
Yeah. I'm a firm believer, and this maybe sounds counterintuitive to somebody who's in the search business, but the answer is downstream in organizations. The challenge is, we have 86,000 charities in Canada today. The groups that are over 5 million in revenue, I think that number is only about 4,300 of the 86,000. And then I think this was information that was posted a while ago on LinkedIn, but I think 1.5 million to 5 million is around 9,000 organizations. So out of 86,000 organizations, only about 14,000 or so are bigger than 1.5 million in revenue. So the majority are definitely under that. That makes it so hard to attract the talent that's needed in order to have a pipeline internally to develop. And so it then becomes a situation where those that have are able to do that, and those that have not cannot. And so it calls into question how we fund our organizations, what we expect of them, what we expect them to deliver on as far as their mission is concerned. And in order to do that, the talent that they need, do they have the internal funding or the ability to attract that next level of talent? And I think in many cases, unfortunately, they don't. And so, we have board volunteers that are trying to make decisions along with the CEOs around the investment that they might need in order to have a successful succession plan. But again, that's largely driven by revenue, and it's largely driven by availability of talent. So I would say most organizations are not in that position in order to bring somebody up internally, because they probably don't have them. And therefore they're always going to have to go out to the marketplace to try and find them. But again, that's getting harder and harder as well. So do I affirm it? Yes, 100%. I think your answer in general, 90% of the time is going to be better if you can move somebody internally up into more senior leadership roles, if you have the capacity to do so. And there are groups that do, and they, I just talked with Sandra Hawken at Holland Bloorview Foundation recently, and she's been able to grow her organization significantly by bringing in younger talent and giving them the development opportunities that they need. So, but that's an organization that has some means to be able to do that. Many don't. So,
you commented that 25 years ago we missed out on attracting Gen X to the sector as a career choice. And of course, we're seeing the impacts now. Are we doing a better job with millennials and Gen Z? I mean, certainly this can't continue as an ongoing problem, or we've got a very bleak future. What needs to change to bring these cohorts into the sector in larger numbers, do you think?
Yeah, I think, uh, there's experts better than me who can talk about all the differences in those different demographics. But I think in many respects, uh, and I don't want to speak for them, but here's my premise. So I think if we deliver to that sector, to that demographic in a way that meets them where they're at, is going to help. They they're not the same as the boomers, and Gen X wasn't the same as the boomers, and the millennials are not the same as Gen X, and down we go as far as the different generations are concerned. But I think it's meeting them where they're at, providing mentorship, providing coaching, uh, providing a way to understand from their perspective where they want society to go, and listening to them, and recognizing that they are the future and we're not anymore. And so, how do we help them to realize their future? And a lot of that means that we have to put aside some of our expectations of older generations versus younger ones, and give them the opportunity to lead. Frankly, I just feel like we, in the charitable sector particularly, we want somebody who's 25 with 50 years experience, right? That's sort of how it seems some days. Well, why not give that 25-year-old the opportunity to lead something? Maybe it's not going to be the biggest charity out there, and wouldn't be, obviously, but I jokingly say, ask a 60-year-old board chair what they were doing at 35 or 30, and they might tell you that, hey, I was running a $25 million division of X company. I'm like, so the 30-year-old who needs to run that $2 million charity you're chairing, you're not going to give them the same opportunity. I don't know, that's tongue in cheek, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to our senior board leaders, but I think we need to remember that we were all young ones. I'm 57 now, so I'm closer to retirement than I'm not, and yet at the same time, if we don't trust that younger generation with leadership roles sooner, we're not going to have ready leadership to lead our organizations. So that's more my personal experience or perspective, but I feel like we need to give leadership reins to younger people sooner, and that could be at the board level, but it definitely can be also at the leadership level in organizations. They're smart, they're innovative. Let them run with it. Give them the reins that they need, and give them the support. And if they need coaching or leadership development, then give them that too. So.
Well, I'd love to wrap up with your thoughts around where you think the sector might be, 10 to 20 years from now, from your perspective in the talent business. Do you have much optimism that we'll be in a better place than we are today?
I am optimistic. And there is a blue sky here. But I think it's the decisions that we make today that are going to impact that. The age-old comment, when's the best time to plant a tree? Well, that was 100 years ago. Well, the second best time is today. And I think if the leaders of today, and I mean the board leaders and the major donors and the foundations and the executive leaders, if they decide today that they can get behind and support, younger generations that are a couple of demographics behind them, then we are going to have a successful transition of talent, and hopefully funding that goes with that, and an ongoing ability to serve the missions and the causes that people are passionate about, and that we absolutely need as a society, right? As we talked about earlier, there's so many big, audacious things that need to be accomplished. We're never going to be able to do them one by one. We're going to have to work together as a society to make those changes. I think the same is for the charitable sector. The talent in the charitable sector. If we recognize that we need talent to meet those major challenges that are facing the world today, then we need to make the investment. Government needs to make the investment. Foundations need to make the investment. People need to take a risk and support the younger leaders as they develop as well, because they're ready. So many of them are excited about the causes that they're part of, and they just need somebody to give them the opportunity to lead. So if that happens, yeah, I'm really optimistic, and I think it can. I think if we all sort of sit down together and figure out how to make those conversations happen, we can do it. If we don't, though, then yeah, I think our it's a little more gloomy, and it'll be our fault if we're not willing to have the conversations that we have to today in order to make the future brighter, for a younger generation, but also for the reality that we all need to contribute to the charitable sector in order for it to be successful. So that's my feeling on it.
The time is now, for sure. This is such an important challenge for nonprofit organizations to address for their continued resilience, of the organizations and of the sector at large. Thank you for your really important insights and advice. Thank you for joining us at Charity Village Connects.
It was a pleasure, Mary. Thank you for having me.